Cowboy saw her denied at the store, then whispered 6 words that changed everything. 6 words. That's all it took to change everything. But before I tell you what he said, you need to understand why those words hit so hard, and why what happened in that Miami store in 1993 still matters today. Those 6 words stopped a man from ending his life. They redirected a woman's entire future. They proved that one moment of courage can shatter years of pain. And they were whispered by a complete stranger. You might think you know where this story is going. You don't. Because what looks like a simple act of kindness becomes something far bigger, a collision of 2 broken people who had no idea they were saving each other. This isn't a fairy tale. It's not wrapped up neatly with a bow. It's messy, raw, uncomfortable at times, but it's true. And by the end, you'll understand why those 6 words, spoken on a sweltering Miami afternoon over 30 years ago, still echo today. What he whispered wasn't magic. It wasn't complicated. But it was exactly what she needed to hear. And maybe, just maybe, it's what you need to hear too. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone struggle and wondered if you should step in? Felt that pull between minding your own business and doing what's right? Ever felt invisible in your own community, like your problems don't matter to anyone, like you could disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice? Have you witnessed a moment so small it seemed insignificant, only to realize later it changed everything? If you're nodding right now, this story is for you. Because in a world growing colder and more disconnected, where we scroll past suffering and swipe away pain, can one act of courage still matter? Can one person stepping forward when everyone else stays silent actually change lives? The answer will surprise you. Most people walk past moments like this every single day. Don't be one of them. Subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us what really matters. Miami, Florida, summer of 1993. The coastal sun beat down mercilessly on palm trees lining Ocean Drive. Wealth and poverty existed side by side, luxury hotels overlooking neighborhoods where families struggled to survive, neon lights advertising paradise, back alleys hiding desperation. This was a city of contrasts, of haves and have-nots, of people living completely different realities just blocks apart. In one of those quieter neighborhoods, far from the tourist traps and beach clubs, stood a small convenience store. The kind with flickering fluorescent lights, sticky floors, and a bell that dinged when you walked through the door. Nothing special, nothing remarkable, just another store in another neighborhood in another American city. But on this particular Sunday afternoon, that ordinary store became the setting for something extraordinary. This is where Veronica Lane's life changed forever. Everyone called her Ronnie, 25 years old, waitress at a local diner, dreamer with big ambitions and an empty bank account. She worked double shifts for pennies, served demanding customers who never remembered her name, and went home every night smelling like grease and coffee. She wanted more, wanted to matter. Wanted to give voice to people like her, the invisible ones who kept the world running but never got credit for it. But dreams require resources, and Ronnie had none. On this hot Sunday, nearly broke, she headed to that convenience store with her last few dollars. She needed bread, milk, basic things to survive until payday. She had no idea that buying bread and milk would lead to the most important conversation of her life. Here's what you need to understand about moments that change everything. They don't announce themselves. They don't come with warning labels or dramatic music. They look ordinary, forgettable. Like 1,000 other moments you've lived through without noticing. Ronnie walked toward that store thinking about rent, about bills, about whether she could make $23 stretch 3 more days. She wasn't thinking about destiny, about purpose, about the stranger who would whisper words that would haunt her for the next 33 years. She was just tired, broke, trying to survive another week in a city that didn't care whether she existed. Sound familiar? Maybe you've been there. Working yourself to exhaustion for barely enough to get by. Wondering when things will finally get easier, questioning whether your life matters at all. Ronnie felt all of that as she approached the store. Then she heard the commotion. Raised voices, a baby crying, a crowd gathering. She could have walked away, should have, probably. She had her own problems, her own survival to worry about. But she didn't walk away. And that decision, that single choice to step forward instead of stepping back, set everything in motion. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Let me take you inside Ronnie's world for a moment. Because if you don't understand where she was, you won't understand why what happened next mattered so much. Ronnie Lane worked at Stella's Diner on 8th Street. The kind of place where the coffee was always burnt and the linoleum floors were permanently stained with decades of grease. She'd been there for 3 years, 3 long years of double shifts that left her feet throbbing and her back screaming. The smell never left her clothes: bacon grease, burnt toast, cheap coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. No matter how many times she washed her uniform, the scent clung to the fabric like a permanent stain. Every morning started the same way. 5:30 alarm. Cold shower because the hot water heater was broken again. Pull on that grease-stained uniform. Walk 4 blocks to the diner because she couldn't afford to keep gas in her car. By 6 a.m., she was pouring coffee for the early crowd. Construction workers who left dirt on the seats. Businessmen who snapped their fingers when they wanted refills. Elderly regulars who nursed a single cup for 2 hours and left quarters as tips. She smiled at demanding customers. She took orders from people who looked right through her like she was furniture. She cleared tables left messy by families who never said thank you. Her feet hurt by 8 a.m. Her lower back ached by noon. By the end of a double shift, she could barely stand. And at the end of every grueling day, she counted her tips in crumpled singles and loose change. $23, that's what she had after Friday's shift. $23 to last until next payday, 3 days away. At 25, Ronnie thought things would get easier. They hadn't. Sound familiar? But here's what made Ronnie different from the other waitresses at Stella's. She refused to believe this was all her life would ever be. Late at night, after her feet stopped aching enough to let her think, she'd sit at her tiny kitchen table with a notebook and a cheap tape recorder. She'd write, she'd plan, she'd dream. Ronnie wanted to host a radio show, not about music or celebrity gossip, not about sports scores or weather reports, about real people, real struggles. The stories nobody else bothered to tell. She wanted to give voice to the unheard, the invisible ones working 3 jobs to keep their lights on, the single mothers stretching every dollar until it screamed, the elderly veterans eating alone in diners, their sacrifices forgot, the people like her. She'd written dozens of show concepts, recorded practice episodes in her cramped apartment, speaking quietly so the neighbors wouldn't complain, sent letters to every local station in Miami. Nothing. Complete silence, rejection after polite rejection. We're not looking for new voices right now. Your concept doesn't fit our current programming. Thank you for your interest, but maybe you've been there, working twice as hard for half as much, wondering when your turn would come. She'd spent years helping others while barely keeping herself afloat. Was kindness just naivety in disguise? That question haunted her on slow afternoons when her feet ached, and her bank account mocked her with its single-digit balance. Maybe I'm fooling myself, she thought on Sunday morning as she tied her apron for the breakfast shift. Maybe dreams are for people who can afford them. But even thinking that felt like betrayal, like giving up on the only thing that made her feel like more than just a waitress nobody remembered. So she kept the notebook, kept the tape recorder, kept the dream alive, even when it felt impossible. Sunday's breakfast rush was brutal. A family of 6, parents and 4 kids under 10, occupied the corner booth for 2 hours. The children spilled syrup on the seats, threw crayons on the floor, and screamed at levels that made Ronnie's head pound. The parents ignored the chaos, scrolling through their phones while their kids destroyed the booth. When they finally left, the tip was 2 crumpled dollar bills on a $64 check. Ronnie cleaned syrup off the vinyl seats and swept up broken crayons, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth hurt. Then came the businessman in the expensive suit. Sent back his eggs 3 times. Too runny, too dry, too cold. Each time, Ronnie walked the plate back to the kitchen, apologized to the cook who was already furious, and returned with a fresh attempt. The businessman left without tipping at all. Next was the woman who complained about everything. The temperature was too cold, then too hot, the music was too loud, the sunlight coming through the window was too bright. Could Ronnie move her to a different table and bring fresh coffee? This one tastes burnt. Every complaint delivered with a voice sharp enough to cut glass. By noon, Ronnie was exhausted. Her feet felt like they were on fire. Her lower back sent shooting pains up her spine every time she bent to pick up a dropped fork or wipe down a table. Her manager, Gloria, noticed the dark circles under Ronnie's eyes. "Go home early," Gloria said, her voice softer than usual. "You look like death warmed over, honey. We can handle the lunch crowd." Ronnie didn't argue. She clocked out, changed out of her uniform in the cramped bathroom, and stepped into the humid Miami afternoon. For once, she was putting herself first. But even in that rare moment of self-care, guilt gnawed at her. Going home early meant fewer tips. Fewer tips meant less money for rent. Less money for rent meant another conversation with her landlord, who was already threatening eviction. She couldn't afford to leave early, but she also couldn't afford to collapse from exhaustion. The contradiction exhausted her almost as much as the work itself. Ronnie walked slowly toward the convenience store on the corner of 12th and Collins, 4 blocks from the diner, her usual stop for basics when payday was still days away and the refrigerator was empty. The afternoon heat pressed down on her like a wet blanket. Sweat trickled down her back. Her uniform, even though she'd changed out of it, had left its mark. Her hair still smelled like grease. Her hands still felt sticky from wiping down tables. She needed bread, milk, maybe eggs if they were on sale, basic things, survival things. She pulled out the crumpled bills in her pocket and counted them again. $23. She'd already done the math 3 times, but desperation made her check again, hoping somehow the amount had magically increased. It hadn't. If this story hits close to home, you're not alone. Hit subscribe. We're building a community that sees you. As she approached the store, she heard something that made her slow her pace. Voices, raised voices, angry voices cutting through the humid air. A crowd had gathered outside the store entrance. A dozen people, maybe more, clustered near the glass doors. Some looked concerned. Others looked uncomfortable. A few whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Through the storefront window, Ronnie could see the source of the commotion, and everything in her wanted to turn around and walk away. Ronnie slowed her pace as she neared the store entrance. Something was very wrong. The crowd stood in a loose semicircle near the glass doors, their attention fixed on whatever was happening inside. Nobody was going in. Nobody was coming out. They just stood there watching. Some had their arms crossed, faces tight with disapproval. Others shifted their weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable but unable to look away. A few elderly women whispered to each other behind cupped hands, their eyes wide with judgment. Through the storefront window, Ronnie could see him, Victor Ramirez, the store owner. She'd seen him before on her previous visits. A man in his mid-50s with silver-streaked hair slicked back from a weathered face. He always stood behind the counter with his arms crossed over his chest like a guard protecting a fortress. Everything about him screamed control, authority, zero tolerance. Victor ran his store the way a warden runs a prison, every item accounted for, every transaction monitored, every customer treated with suspicion until proven trustworthy. No credit, no exceptions, no mercy. The sign taped to the register said it all. Your emergency is not my problem. Cash only. Exact change appreciated. Ronnie had always found the sign cruel. Now, watching the scene unfold through the window, she understood just how cruel. Standing at the counter was a young woman, probably early 20s, clutching a small child to her hip. The little girl couldn't have been more than 2 years old. Big hazel eyes, tiny hands gripping her mother's faded t-shirt. The child's face was scrunched up on the verge of tears. The mother's clothes were worn thin. Her jeans had holes at the knees, not the fashionable kind, but the kind that came from poverty and too many washes. Her shoes were held together with duct tape. Her hair hung limp around her face, unwashed for days. But it was her expression that cut through Ronnie like a knife. Desperation. Pure, unfiltered desperation. The kind that comes when you've run out of options and you're standing at the edge of a cliff with nowhere left to go. Ronnie couldn't hear what they were saying through the glass, but she didn't need to. The mother was pleading. Her mouth moved rapidly, her free hand gesturing toward the baby formula on the counter. Her eyes brimmed with tears that hadn't fallen yet. Victor stood unmoved. His face was stone. His arms remained crossed. He shook his head slowly, deliberately, like a judge delivering a death sentence. Then Ronnie heard it. The baby started to cry, not a whimper, not a fuss. A full-throated wail that cut through the humid afternoon air and made everyone in the crowd wince. The mother bounced the child, trying to soothe her, but the crying only intensified. The sound was primal, hungry, desperate. An older man in the crowd muttered, "Somebody should do something." But nobody moved. The mother's voice rose, audible now even from outside. "Please, I just need some formula for my baby. I have money. I counted everything twice. I'm only short a few dollars, please." Victor's response was loud enough for everyone to hear. "My prices are what they are. You're short by $4.37. I won't let you walk out of here without paying the full amount." The mother's face crumpled. "I don't have it. I've been looking for work. I've been trying so hard. My daughter needs to eat. Please, I'm begging you." "Not my problem," Victor said flatly. His voice carried no emotion, no sympathy, nothing. "Business is business." A woman in the crowd gasped. "He can't be serious." But Victor was deadly serious. "You want the formula," he continued, his voice cold as ice. "Pay for it, otherwise put it back and leave my store." The baby's wails grew louder. The mother's tears finally spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. "I have $3.63, she said, her voice breaking. "That's all I have in the world right now. Can't you just—" "No," Victor cut her off. "And if you don't leave in the next 30 seconds, I'm calling the police." The crowd erupted in whispers. "He's going to call the cops on a mother with a hungry baby. That's heartless. Somebody should help her." But still nobody moved. This is the moment that defines us, isn't it? The moment when we decide whether to get involved or protect ourselves. The moment when convenience battles conscience. Ronnie stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the horror unfold. Her hands trembled as she clutched her small purse. Inside was $23. Her last $23 until payday. Her mind raced through calculations she'd already done 100 times. Rent was due in 5 days. She was already 2 weeks late. Her landlord had left 3 messages threatening eviction. Her refrigerator was empty except for a half-empty jar of peanut butter and some wilted lettuce. Her car needed gas. Her electric bill was overdue. She owed her coworker $15 from last week. $23 wasn't enough to solve any of those problems, but it was all she had. The baby's cries pierced through her thoughts like needles. Inside the store, the mother was now sobbing openly. "Please, she's only 18 months old. She hasn't eaten since yesterday. I'm trying. I'm really trying." Victor checked his watch. 20 seconds, then I'm making the call. Sweat trickled down Ronnie's back, mixing with the lingering smell of grease from the diner. The humid air felt suffocating. The judgmental whispers from the crowd buzzed in her ears like insects. She thought about walking away. Nobody would blame her. She had her own desperate situation, her own survival to worry about. Helping this stranger wouldn't fix her own problems, it would make them worse. She could go to a different store, buy her bread and milk somewhere else, avoid this entire mess. Her feet wanted to move, wanted to turn around and leave, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the sound of that baby crying. Maybe it was the memory of her own mother years ago struggling to put food on the table after Ronnie's father left. Maybe it was something deeper, something her grandmother used to say, "Baby, we ain't got much, but we always got enough to share." Here's where it gets complicated. Ronnie had $23 to her name, $23 until payday, 3 days away. Was it selfish to walk away or stupid to give it up? Comment below, what would you have done? Be honest. Victor pulled his phone from his pocket. "Time's up, I'm calling." The mother let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. "No, please don't do this." The baby's wails reached a fever pitch, and Ronnie's body made the decision before her mind could catch up. She pushed through the crowd. The conversation stopped. Eyes turned toward her. The young mother looked up, confusion cutting through her tears. Ronnie pulled open the glass door and stepped inside the store. The air conditioning hit her like a wall of cold air, but she barely noticed. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her hands shook, but her voice came out steady. "Excuse me." Victor looked at her with annoyance. "This doesn't concern you." "How much does she need?" Ronnie asked. $4.37, Victor said through clenched teeth. "But this is between me and her." Ronnie didn't let him finish. She opened her purse with trembling fingers, pulled out a $20 bill and placed it on the counter. The crowd outside pressed closer to the windows. "Give her the formula," Ronnie said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "And keep the change. Let her get whatever else her baby needs." For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The crowd outside erupted in gasps and murmurs. "Did she just... She gave her $20. Oh my God." The young mother stared at Ronnie, her eyes wide with disbelief. Tears streamed down her face, but they were different tears now, not desperation, gratitude, shock, relief. I can't believe you'd do this for me," the mother whispered. "I don't even know you." "You don't need to know me," Ronnie said softly. "Your baby needs to eat. That's all that matters." The mother started crying harder, clutching her daughter closer. But Victor's face turned dark red. His jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists on the counter. "You don't just give money away in MY store," he exploded. "This is MY business. I run it MY way." The crowd outside moved closer to the windows, their faces pressed against the glass. Victor's voice rose to a shout. "You people think you can just walk in here and make your own rules. This is private property. I decide what happens here." Ronnie stood her ground, though her legs felt like water. "She needed help. I helped her, that's all." "That's not all." Victor slammed his hand on the counter, making the mother flinch. "You're encouraging this. Next thing you know, every beggar in Miami will come in here expecting handouts." "She's not a beggar," Ronnie said, her voice rising now too. "She's a mother trying to feed her child." "I don't care what she is," Victor shouted. "My store, you pay full price or you get nothing." The baby was still crying. The mother stood frozen, clutching the formula like it might disappear. The crowd outside was growing. More people stopped to see what the commotion was about. Some pulled out their phones, though this was 1993, no videos, just watching. Ronnie felt the weight of every eye on her, felt the shame creeping up her neck, felt the reality of what she'd just done settling into her bones. She'd given away money she desperately needed. For a stranger, for a baby she'd never see again. Was it brave or just foolish? Before she could answer that question, before Victor could shout again, a voice cut through the chaos like thunder. "Hold on there, partner." Everyone turned. The door swung open and he walked in. That's when everything changed. That's when he appeared. Here's what most people won't tell you. Moments like this happen every single day and most of us do nothing. We tell ourselves it's not our problem. We walk away. But what if the person who needs help is someone you love next time? What if you're the one who needs a stranger to care? Subscribe now. Because the day you need this kind of courage, you'll wish you'd been paying attention. Still won't subscribe? Drop a comment and tell me why you'd rather scroll past. Stories that could save someone's life. The man who stepped through the door didn't belong in Miami. At least not in the way you'd expect. He wore a weathered leather jacket despite the oppressive heat. Faded denim jeans that had seen years of honest work. Scuffed boots, not the polished kind you buy in stores, but the kind you earn on dirt roads and cattle ranches. A wide-brimmed hat sat low on his head, casting shadows across a face carved by sun and hardship. He was in his early 40s. Tall, easily 6'2", broad-shouldered in a way that suggested strength built from labor, not gyms. His hands were calloused, his jaw was set. His eyes were sharp and assessing. This was Colt West. And the moment he walked into that store, the entire energy shifted. It wasn't that he was loud or aggressive. He wasn't. He moved with quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and not needing to prove it to anyone. The crowd outside fell silent, sensing something had changed. Victor looked up from his tirade, his expression shifting from rage to confusion to annoyance. The young mother clutched her baby tighter, unsure if this stranger was another threat or something else. Ronnie stood frozen, her $20 bill still on the counter, watching this cowboy who'd appeared out of nowhere like something from a different era. Colt took off his hat and held it in one hand. His eyes swept the scene in front of him, the crying baby, the desperate mother, the defiant store owner, the woman who just sacrificed her last dollar, and the crowd of onlookers who'd done nothing. He'd seen enough. "Seems to me this good woman just stepped up when no one else would," Colt said. His voice was deep and commanding, but not loud, not aggressive, just immovable. Every word carried weight. Victor's face flushed darker. "And who the hell are you?" Colt's expression didn't change. "Just a customer, but I reckon I'm also someone who knows the difference between running a business and running people into the ground." Understand why Colt West walked into that store at that exact moment. You need to understand where he'd come from. Not just geographically, though he'd driven over 1,000 miles from his ranch outside Austin, Texas, but emotionally, spiritually. 3 weeks earlier, Colt's father had died. Heart attack. Sudden. Final. No warning. No goodbyes. One day, James West was fixing fence posts on the family ranch, whistling while he worked. The next day, he was gone. Colt had found him, lying in the dirt near the north pasture, his hat a few feet away where it had fallen. The cattle standing nearby, confused why the man who fed them every morning wasn't getting up. The funeral had been packed. His father had been beloved in their small Texas community. A man who valued people over profit, who'd given jobs to folks others wouldn't hire. Who'd extended credit when banks wouldn't. Who taught Colt that a man's worth wasn't measured by what he owned, but by how he treated people who couldn't do anything for him. After the burial, Colt tried to keep going, tried to run the ranch the way his father had, but everywhere he looked he saw reminders. His father's coffee cup still on the kitchen counter, his work gloves hanging by the barn door, his favorite chair at the dinner table permanently empty. The grief was suffocating, so Colt left. Told his mother and brothers he needed some time away, needed to clear his head, needed to figure out how to keep living in a world that no longer made sense without his father in it. He'd driven south with no real destination in mind. Ended up in Miami because it was as far from the ranch as he could get. Hot instead of dry, ocean instead of plains, crowded instead of empty. He'd been in the city for 5 days, staying at a cheap motel near the beach, spending his days walking aimlessly, spending his nights staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. And this Sunday afternoon, he'd walked into that convenience store for one reason only, but we'll get to that in a moment. Right now, Colt stood in Victor's store, facing down a man who'd forgotten what it meant to be human. Victor stepped back from the counter, sizing up this stranger who dared to challenge him. "This is my store, my rules. I don't need some cowboy telling me how to run it." Colt took a slow step forward, not threatening, just present, just refusing to back down. "You could make someone's day and keep your customers happy," Colt said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "That might boost your business more than those high prices ever will." "This isn't about kindness," Victor shot back. "It's business." The crowd outside pressed closer to the windows now. This wasn't just about baby formula anymore. This was bigger, a clash of world views, 2 different visions of what it meant to be human. Colt's eyes narrowed slightly. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but somehow more powerful. "Business without humanity isn't business. It's extortion." The words landed like a physical blow. Someone in the crowd outside started clapping, then another. Soon half the people watching were applauding. Victor's face turned from red to purple. "You think you can just walk in here and—" "I think," Colt interrupted, his voice still calm but now carrying unmistakable authority, "that you've forgotten something important." He gestured toward the crowd outside. "These people, they're your neighbors, not your enemies, not your ATM machines, your neighbors. People trying to survive just like you. And when you treat them like this, you're not protecting your business. You're destroying your community." Victor opened his mouth to argue, but Colt wasn't finished. "My father ran a ranch for 40 years, Colt continued. "Know what he taught me. That the measure of a man isn't how much he can squeeze out of people when they're desperate. It's how he treats them when they can't give him anything in return." Store had gone completely silent. Even the baby had stopped crying, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Colt pulled out his wallet, thick, well-worn leather. He counted out several bills and placed them on the counter next to Ronnie's 20. "Here's what we're gonna do," Colt said. "I'm paying for this mother's formula, and I'm filling her basket with whatever else she needs. Diapers, food, whatever." Victor's jaw dropped. What Colt said next. Victor never saw it coming. Neither did anyone else. Colt turned away from Victor to address the crowd outside. His voice carried through the open door. "How many of you shop here regularly?" Hands went up, tentatively at first. Then more confidently, 10 hands, 15, 20. "And how many of you would rather take your business somewhere that treats people with decency?" Every hand stayed up. The message was clear. Victor could win this battle and lose the war. Colt turned back to Victor. "So here's your choice. You can ring up these groceries and let this mother feed her baby. Or you can dig in your heels, and every person watching right now will know that Victor Ramirez values a few dollars more than a hungry child." He paused, letting the weight of that settle. "Which story do you want told about you?" Victor looked at the money on the counter, then at Colt, then at the crowd outside, their faces pressed against the glass, then at Ronnie, still standing there with quiet defiance in her eyes. Then at the young mother, tears streaming down her face, hope flickering for the first time. For a long moment nobody moved, nobody breathed, the air conditioning hummed. A car drove past outside. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Then Victor's shoulders sagged just slightly. The fight drained from his eyes like water from a broken dam. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Take what you need." The young mother let out a sob of relief. She grabbed the formula with shaking hands, then looked at Colt and Ronnie with an expression that held more gratitude than words could ever convey. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you, I don't know what to say." Colt's stern expression softened slightly. "No need to say anything, just take care of that little one." He gestured toward the shelves. "Go on, get whatever else you need. Diapers, baby food, don't worry about the cost." Mother moved through the store in a daze, selecting items she desperately needed but couldn't afford. Diapers, baby wipes, jars of baby food, a small package of formula enough for several days. Victor rang everything up in silence, his movements mechanical. His face had lost its anger, replaced by something closer to shame. The total came to $43.16. Colt pushed the bills across the counter without a word. The mother left the store clutching her bags like precious cargo. The crowd outside parted for her like a wave, some patting her shoulder, others offering quiet words of encouragement. As the door closed behind her, the store felt suddenly empty despite the people still inside. Colt turned to Ronnie for the first time since he'd entered, really looked at her. He saw exhaustion in her eyes, saw the grease stains on her clothes that no amount of washing could remove. Saw hands that trembled slightly from adrenaline and fear and the weight of what she'd just done. But he also saw something else, courage, humanity, the kind of selfless kindness his father had spent his whole life teaching him to recognize and honor. "You did good," Colt said simply. Ronnie felt her throat tight. "So did you." Stories like this don't go viral. They get buried. Subscribe before this disappears from your feed. Colt picked up his hat from where he'd set it on the counter and headed toward the door. But before he left, he paused and looked back at Ronnie. "You mind if I walk with you for a bit?" Ronnie nodded, not trusting her voice. Together they stepped out into the Miami heat. They stood outside the store, two strangers bound by a shared moment of courage. The crowd had mostly dispersed now, the drama over. People returned to their Sunday routines, the confrontation already becoming a story they'd tell at dinner. A few lingered, still talking in hushed tones, but most had moved on. The Miami sun hung high and merciless. The sidewalk radiated heat that shimmered in waves. Somewhere down the block, salsa music drifted from an open apartment window. A car horn blared in the distance. Life continued as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Ronnie and Colt, everything had changed. Ronnie wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She felt the weight of what she'd just done settling into her bones like concrete. $20, gone, money she desperately needed. Money that represented meals, rent, survival. But looking at Colt, this stranger who'd stepped in when everyone else stayed silent, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "You didn't have to do that," Colt said, his voice quieter now, more personal. The commanding edge from inside the store had softened. Ronnie shrugged, trying to appear casual even though her hands still trembled. "Neither did you." A smile flickered across Colt's weathered face, just briefly. "Fair point." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, not awkward, just present. Two people processing what had just happened and what it meant. Colt removed his hat and ran a hand through sweat-dampened hair. Up close, Ronnie could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair. The exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. She recognized it because she carried the same exhaustion. The kind that comes from fighting battles nobody else sees, from carrying weight nobody else acknowledges, from trying to stay human in a world that rewards cruelty. Then Colt's expression shifted, the brief smile faded, his eyes darkened with something heavier, something that looked like pain fighting its way to the surface. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. Ronnie nodded. "Sure." Colt glanced back at the store, then at the street, then finally back at Ronnie. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I need you to know something." He leaned in slightly, close enough that only she could hear. His next words came out rough, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep inside his chest. "Your kindness just saved my life." Ronnie blinked, confused. "What?" Colt's eyes glistened, not quite tears, but close, fighting them back. "I came to Miami to die," he said. The world seemed to stop. The traffic noise faded. The salsa music disappeared. The heat, the humidity, the chaos of the city, all of it narrowed to just the two of them standing on that sun-scorched sidewalk. Ronnie's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" Colt put his hat back on, but not before Ronnie saw his hands shaking. "My father died 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. He was only 63. His voice cracked slightly on the word 63. "One day he was out on our ranch fixing fence posts," Colt continued, staring at the ground now, whistling while he worked like he always did. "The next day he was gone, just gone." Ronnie listened, saying nothing. What could she say? "After the funeral I tried to keep going," Colt said. "Tried to run the ranch the way he taught me, but everywhere I looked I saw him. His coffee cup still on the counter, his work gloves by the barn door, his chair at the dinner table empty." He paused, swallowing hard. The grief, it was like drowning in slow motion. Every day a little more water in my lungs, a little less air, a little less reason to wake up in the morning. Ronnie felt tears pricking her own eyes now. "So I left," Colt said. "Told everyone I needed a vacation. Told myself I just needed to get away for a bit, but that was a lie." He looked directly at Ronnie now. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear, focused, carrying a terrible honesty. "I came to that store to buy whiskey. Not beer, not snacks, whiskey, enough to make sure I wouldn't wake up tomorrow." The confession hung in the humid air like smoke. Ronnie's hands went to her mouth. "No, please tell me you're not." "I'm not," Colt interrupted gently. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. I'm not because of you." Confusion flashed across Ronnie's face. "I don't understand." Colt took a deep breath, composing himself. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier but still raw with emotion. "I was standing in the back aisle," he said, "holding a bottle of Jack Daniels, running through the plan in my head. I had it all figured out. Go back to my motel room, write a note to my mother, make it clean, make it final." Ronnie felt like she couldn't breathe. "Then I heard the commotion up front," Colt continued. "Heard that baby crying, heard that mother begging, heard Victor being cruel for no reason except that he could be." He paused, his jaw clenching. "And I thought about walking away, thought about minding my own business, thought about just buying my whiskey and leaving, but then," his voice dropped even quieter, "then I saw you." "Me?" Ronnie whispered. "You stepped forward when nobody else would," Colt said, his words gaining strength now. "You gave away everything you had. I could see it in your eyes. You needed that money, desperately, but you gave it away anyway, for a stranger, for a baby you'll never see again." Tears flowed freely down his cheeks now, though his voice remained steady. "And something broke open in me when I saw that." He removed his hat again, holding it against his chest like he was standing before something sacred. "I watched you and I thought about my father. He used to tell me, 'Son, the bravest thing you can do is care when the world tells you not to.' That's what he lived by. That's what he died believing." Colt's voice cracked again. "Watching you give away your last dollar, seeing that kind of courage, it reminded me. It reminded me that there's still beauty in this world, still goodness, still people who choose humanity over self-preservation." He put his hat back on, but his eyes never left Ronnie's face. "If you hadn't stepped forward, I wouldn't have either. I'd have bought that whiskey. I'd have gone back to my room. And tomorrow my mother would be burying her husband and her son in the same month." The weight of those words settled over them like a heavy blanket. Those 6 words, your kindness just saved my life, they weren't gratitude. They were a confession, a lifeline, a promise. Ronnie couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face now, mixing with sweat in the oppressive heat. She'd walked into that store planning to buy bread and milk. She'd walked out having stopped a suicide without even knowing it. The magnitude of it threatened to crush her. "I'm not saying I'm fixed," Colt said quickly, reading the panic on her face. "Grief doesn't work like that. I'm not magically okay because I saw you do something kind. The pain is still there. The emptiness is still there." He looked down at his boots, scuffed and dusty from 1,000 days of ranch work. "But you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. You reminded me why my father's life mattered, why the lessons he taught me matter, why life matters." Ronnie finally found her voice, though it came out broken. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Colt replied. "I just needed you to know, needed you to understand that what you did in there, it wasn't just about that mother and her baby. It was bigger than that." He gestured toward the store. "You could have walked away, should have, probably. You had every reason to protect yourself, to save that money, to avoid the trouble. But you didn't. You chose courage over comfort. You chose someone else's survival over your own." His voice grew thick with emotion again. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? How beautiful, how desperately the world needs people like you?" Ronnie shook her head. "I'm not special. I'm just a waitress who can't pay her rent." "You're wrong," Colt said firmly. "You're exactly the kind of person my father spent his whole life trying to be. The kind who sees suffering and refuses to look away. The kind who makes the world better just by being in it." They stood in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of what had just been shared. Then Colt spoke again, softer now. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Don't let the world make you hard," he said. "Don't let people like Victor convince you that kindness is weakness. Don't let poverty steal your humanity." He looked at her with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in years. "Promise me, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how many times the world kicks you down, promise me you'll keep being exactly who you are." Ronnie wiped tears from her face. "I promise if you promise me something too." "What's that?" "That you'll stay, that you'll keep fighting, that you won't go back to that motel room with a bottle." Colt was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "Deal." Ronnie took his hand, not a romantic gesture, something deeper than that. A pact between two people who'd found each other at the exact moment they both needed saving. "You hungry?" Colt asked suddenly. "Because I am, and I'd like to hear more about you, about your dreams, about that radio show you want to start." Ronnie's eyes widened. "How did you have that look," Colt said with a slight smile. "Like someone carrying a dream they're afraid to speak out loud." "My father had that look when he first started talking about the ranch. I recognize it." For the first time since the confrontation, Ronnie felt something other than shock or fear or disbelief. She felt hope. "There's a diner a few blocks from here," she said. "Terrible coffee, mediocre food, but it's cheap. Sounds perfect." They started walking side by side, two broken people who'd accidentally saved each other. "Can I ask you something?" Ronnie said after a few steps. "Sure." "Why did you really come into that store? You said you were going to buy whiskey, but you stepped in to help instead. What changed?" Colt thought about that for a moment. "Honestly, I think I was looking for a reason, any reason, a sign that staying was worth it, that life still had moments worth witnessing." He glanced at Ronnie. "And then I saw you, scared, broke, exhausted, but still choosing to help, still choosing humanity, and I thought, if she can find the courage to do that, maybe I can find the courage to stay." They walked in comfortable silence for another block. If you've ever felt invisible, keep watching. This story proves you matter more than you know. Subscribe, you deserve to hear that. The diner came into view. Through the window, Ronnie could see Gloria wiping down tables, probably wondering where she disappeared to. "You ready for this?" Colt asked. Ronnie nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." They pushed through the door together. Colt didn't leave Miami that day. Instead, he and Ronnie spent the afternoon together. After coffee at the diner, which was indeed terrible just as she'd promised, they walked toward the beach. Neither had a specific destination in mind. They just walked and talked, really talked, the kind of honest conversation that only happens between strangers who have accidentally seen each other's souls. Ronnie told him about the diner, about counting pennies, about the radio show dream she'd carried for 5 years but never had the courage to start, about feeling invisible in a city full of people. Colt told her about the ranch, about finding his father in the dirt, about the crushing weight of inheriting a legacy he didn't know how to honor, about the bottle of whiskey he'd left on the shelf in that store. They reached the beach as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The sand was hot under their feet. The ocean stretched endless and blue. Tourists dotted the shoreline, but Ronnie and Colt found a quieter spot away from the crowds. They sat on a weathered bench overlooking the water. "Can I tell you what I've been thinking?" Colt said after a long silence. "Please. I've been thinking about what my father would say if he could see me now, if he knew I came here planning to." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "He'd be disappointed," Colt continued. "Not angry, just disappointed. Because he spent his whole life teaching me that when things get hard, you don't quit, you adapt, you find a way forward." Ronnie nodded. "Sounds like a wise man." He was, and I've been dishonoring his memory by trying to escape the pain instead of learning from it. Colt turned to face Ronnie directly. "But watching you today, seeing you sacrifice everything for a stranger, it woke something up in me. It reminded me what courage actually looks like, and it made me realize something important." "What's that?" "That my father's legacy isn't the ranch, it's the lesson. Take care of people, especially when it costs you something." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the waves crash against the shore. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Seagulls called overhead. Then Colt spoke again, his voice carrying new determination. "I'm going back to Texas, but I'm going back different. I'm going to run that ranch the way my father would have wanted, as a place that takes care of people, not just profits." He looked at Ronnie. "What about you? What are you going to do?" Ronnie stared at the ocean, feeling something shift inside her chest, a door opening, a path revealing itself. "I'm going to stop waiting for permission to chase my dreams," she said, surprised by the conviction in her own voice. "I'm starting that radio show. I don't care if nobody listens at first. I don't care if I have to broadcast from my apartment on equipment I can barely afford. I'm done waiting for someone to tell me I'm good enough." Colt smiled. A real smile this time, reaching his eyes. "Good. The world needs your voice." "And the world needs ranchers who remember what humanity looks like," Ronnie replied. They shook hands again. But this time it felt different, not just a greeting, a promise, a pact. Two broken people committing to live differently, to honor the moment that had saved them both. "You know what's funny?" Ronnie said. "This morning I woke up thinking today would be just another terrible Sunday. Work a shift, buy groceries, go home alone, same as always. And instead I met someone who reminded me why I keep trying, why kindness matters even when it costs everything." Colt nodded slowly. "Same here. I woke up thinking today was my last day, that there was nothing left worth staying for." He gestured toward the ocean, the beach, the city behind them. "But there's everything worth staying for. I just couldn't see it until you showed me." We've all stood at crossroads like this, moments where we choose between staying stuck or taking the leap. They chose the leap. As the sun dipped lower, they made plans to stay in touch, exchanged addresses, promised to write letters, real letters handwritten and mailed, to hold each other accountable to the promises they just made. Then they parted ways, but their story was just beginning. 3 months later, Ronnie kept her promise. She started her radio show from her cramped apartment, bought a used microphone and recording equipment from a pawn shop, set up a makeshift studio in her bedroom closet where the acoustics were better. She called it Voices of the Invisible. The first episode had exactly 3 listeners: her neighbor, her coworker from the diner, and Colt, listening from his ranch in Texas. But Ronnie didn't quit. Every week she told stories. Stories about the busboy at the diner who sent money home to his family in Honduras, about the elderly woman who visited the library every day because her apartment was too lonely, about the young mother struggling to afford baby formula. She told the stories nobody else bothered to tell. 6 months later, Colt transformed his ranch. He turned it into a sanctuary for struggling families. Hired people others wouldn't hire, ex-convicts trying to rebuild their lives, veterans dealing with trauma, single parents who needed flexible work schedules. He paid fair wages, offered housing in the old bunkhouses, created a community built on his father's values, people over profit. The ranch stopped being just a business. It became a lifeline. 1 year later, Ronnie's show gained a local following. Small but dedicated, people called in to share their own stories. The diner waitress became a voice for the voiceless. Radio stations started noticing. One offered her a weekly slot, actual airtime, actual listeners. She quit the diner, focused on the show full-time. Still barely made ends meet, but she was doing work that mattered. 2 years later, Colt and Ronnie were still in touch through letters. Real letters. Handwritten on paper, mailed across 1,000 miles. In 1993, before email and social media, this was how connection survived distance. Colt wrote about the families on the ranch, about the veteran who'd stopped drinking, about the single mother who'd saved enough to rent her own apartment, about the slow, hard work of building community. Ronnie wrote about her show, about the stories she uncovered, about the people who called in crying because someone finally heard them. About the quiet revolution happening in Miami's invisible communities. They never became romantic, never even saw each other again for years, but their friendship, forged in that moment outside the convenience store, became the foundation both of them built their new lives on. They were proof that authentic connection doesn't require proximity, just commitment, just showing up, just remembering the promise you made on a beach in Miami when the sun was setting and everything felt possible. Then came the call that changed everything again. It was a Thursday afternoon. Ronnie was preparing for her weekly broadcast when her phone rang. A woman's voice, nervous and emotional. "Is this Voices of the Invisible?" "It is," Ronnie said. "How can I help you?" "My name is Maria, and I need to tell you a story about two strangers who saved my life and didn't even know it." Something in the woman's voice made Ronnie's heart race. "Go on," she said quietly. 2 years ago, I was at a convenience store trying to buy formula for my baby. I didn't have enough money. The owner was going to call the police, I thought. I thought it was over, that I'd lose my daughter, that I'd end up homeless. Ronnie's breath caught. Then a woman stepped forward. She gave me her last $20. She didn't know me, didn't know if I'd waste it or use it. She just helped. And then a cowboy, I swear to God, an actual cowboy, he paid for everything. Filled my basket with food and diapers. Maria's voice broke. I never got their names, never got to thank them properly, but those two strangers, they changed everything. "What happened after that day?" Ronnie asked, tears already forming. "I got job training through a community program, found work as a medical assistant, saved enough to rent a small apartment. My daughter, she's 4 now, healthy, happy, thriving." Maria paused. "I heard your show last week. The story you told about kindness having ripples we never see. And I realized I'm one of those ripples. I'm living proof that one moment of courage can redirect an entire life." Ronnie could barely speak. "Maria, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I was the woman in that store, the one who gave you the $20. Silence on the other end. Then sobbing, deep guttural sobbing. "You saved my life," Maria finally managed. "You and that cowboy, you saved us both. Remember how we said 6 words changed everything? Here's what you didn't know. They changed 4 lives that day, not just 2, but the story doesn't end there." 3 months after Maria's call, Ronnie received an unexpected visitor at the radio station. She was preparing for her evening broadcast when someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find a man she hadn't seen in over 2 years, Victor Ramirez, the store owner. He looked different, older, thinner. The hardness in his face had softened into something closer to regret. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice quiet. Ronnie hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat across from each other in her small studio. Victor wouldn't meet her eyes at first, just stared at his hands, calloused and worn from decades of work. "I heard your show," he finally said. "Maria's call, the story about the store, about what I almost did." Ronnie waited. "I need to apologize," Victor continued, "for that day. For how I treated her, how I treated you, how I've treated people for years." He looked up now, his eyes red-rimmed. "You want to know why I was so cruel? Why I couldn't just let her have the damn formula?" Ronnie nodded. "My wife was sick, cancer. We had no insurance. The medical bills were destroying us. Every dollar mattered, every single dollar. And I convinced myself that if I just held the line, if I just refused to give an inch, I could save her." His voice cracked. "But she died anyway, 6 months after that day in the store. And all my cruelty, all my fighting over $4.37, it didn't save her. It didn't save anything. It just made me into someone I didn't recognize. Tears flowed freely down his face now. I heard Maria on your show talking about how two strangers saved her life, and I realized I almost destroyed it, over pocket change, over pride, over fear disguised as business sense. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I sold the store last month, couldn't keep running it. Every time someone came in struggling, I saw Maria, saw her baby crying. Saw you stepping forward when I was being a monster. What are you doing now? Ronnie asked gently. Volunteering at a food bank, trying to give back some of what I took from the world through my bitterness. He met her eyes directly now. I can't undo what I did, can't take back the cruelty, but I can try to be different going forward. You showed me that, you and that cowboy. You showed me what humanity looks like, and I've been trying to find my way back to it ever since. Ronnie felt tears on her own cheeks. Thank you for telling me, she said. It takes courage to admit you were wrong. It takes more courage to be kind when the world is crushing you, Victor replied. That's what you taught me. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, for everything. After he left, Ronnie sat in silence for a long time, processing what had just happened. Even the villain had changed. Even the man who'd seemed irredeemable had found his way back to humanity. Victor, the man who almost destroyed this moment, heard this story and changed his entire life. He went from being the problem to being part of the solution. Now ask yourself, if even he could wake up and do better, what's your excuse? Thousands will watch this video. Most will feel inspired for 5 minutes, then forget. Don't be most people. Subscribe so these stories actually stick. Because here's the hard truth. If you won't take 2 seconds to click a button, how will you ever take action when it really counts? Not subscribing. Then comment below and be honest. Tell me what's stopping you from committing to something meaningful. Let's step back for a moment and talk about what this story really means. Because it's easy to hear a story like this and think, that's nice, that's inspiring. Then close the video and move on with your life. But if you do that, you'll miss the most important part. Ronnie never knew her simple act of kindness would stop a suicide. She gave away her last $20 thinking she was helping a mother buy formula. She had no idea she was saving a man's life at the same time. This is the first lesson. Your kindness has reach you can't see. Every act of courage creates ripples that extend far beyond the moment. You help one person, and they go on to help 10 others. Those 10 help 100. Those 100 help 1,000. Ronnie couldn't have known that giving away $20 would lead to Maria rebuilding her entire life, getting job training, becoming a medical assistant, raising a healthy daughter who will grow up knowing that strangers saved her family. She couldn't have known that her courage would inspire Colt to choose life over death. That Colt would go on to transform his ranch into a sanctuary for struggling families. That dozens of people, veterans, ex-convicts, single parents, would find hope and purpose because Colt stayed alive. She couldn't have known that even Victor, the cruel store owner, would eventually find his way back to humanity, that he'd spend his remaining years volunteering at food banks, trying to give back what his bitterness had taken from the world. 4 lives changed that day. Not 2. 4. And the ripples keep spreading. Maria's daughter will grow up with the story of strangers who cared. She'll carry that lesson into her own life. She'll pass it to her children. The families on Colt's ranch will remember that someone gave them a chance when nobody else would. They'll extend that same grace to others. We rarely see the full impact of our choices. We plant seeds without knowing what trees will grow from them. But the trees grow anyway. Here's the second lesson, and it's one most people don't want to hear. Sometimes saving others saves you. Colt West walked into that store planning to end his life. The grief from losing his father had become unbearable. The ranch felt empty. Every morning felt pointless. He couldn't see a future worth living. But watching Ronnie sacrifice everything for a stranger, seeing that kind of selfless courage, gave him a reason to stay. Not because his pain disappeared. It didn't. Grief doesn't work like that. You don't just witness kindness and suddenly feel better. But he found something bigger than his pain. Purpose. Meaning. A reminder that life still holds beauty worth witnessing. When you serve something bigger than yourself, when you step outside your own suffering to help someone else, you find meaning that depression can't touch. This doesn't mean you should ignore your mental health. It doesn't mean you shouldn't seek professional help. It doesn't mean your pain isn't real or valid. But it does mean that connection, real, authentic human connection, has power that isolation can never understand. Colt could have bought that whiskey, could have gone back to his motel room, could have ended his story right there. Instead, he stepped forward, not to save himself but to help a stranger. And in helping her, he found a reason to keep going. Maybe you're at a stage in life where you wonder if you still matter, if your best years are behind you. Let me tell you something. Ronnie and Colt prove that's a lie. At any age, at any stage, you have the power to change lives, including your own. Depression and isolation lose their grip when connection is restored. When you remember you're part of something bigger than your pain. The third lesson might be the hardest to accept. True wealth isn't money. Ronnie gave away her last $20, money she desperately needed, money that represented meals, rent, survival. And what did she get in return? A lifelong friendship with Colt, a renewed sense of purpose, the courage to finally start her radio show, a career that gave voice to the voiceless. A life that mattered. She traded $20 for a legacy. Colt almost threw away everything, his life, his future, his father's legacy, because he was measuring worth in the wrong currency. He had land, cattle, assets, money in the bank, but he felt worthless because he'd lost connection, lost meaning, lost the relationships that made life worth living. He was rich in dollars and poor in purpose. After that day in Miami, he changed his priorities. Ranch stopped being about profit margins and became about people, about community, about carrying forward his father's values. He became truly wealthy, not in bank accounts but in the lives he touched, the families he helped, the legacy he built. We live in a world obsessed with accumulation, more money, more possessions, more status, more followers, more everything. But the people on their deathbeds never say, "I wish I'd made more money." They say, "I wish I'd spent more time with people I love. I wish I'd helped more. I wish I'd mattered more." Community, purpose, connection. These are treasures that can't be stolen, can't be lost in a market crash, can't be taken away when you die. They're the only wealth that actually transfers to the next generation. Ronnie understood this instinctively. Even when she had nothing, she had everything that mattered. The courage to care, the strength to give, the wisdom to know that humanity is worth more than cash. The fourth lesson, one moment of courage can rewrite your story. Neither Ronnie nor Colt planned to be brave that day. They didn't wake up thinking, "Today I'm going to change someone's life." Ronnie woke up exhausted, broke, and defeated, just trying to survive another week. Colt woke up planning his suicide, trying to end his story permanently. But they both made a choice in a critical moment. A choice to step forward instead of stepping back. A choice to act instead of watching. And that single choice redirected their entire lives. Ronnie went from a forgotten waitress to a voice for the voiceless, from someone who felt invisible to someone who made others feel seen. Colt went from planning his death to building a legacy his father would be proud of. From drowning in grief to creating sanctuary for others drowning in their own struggles. One moment, one choice, everything changed. You might be thinking, "But I'm not in a dramatic situation like that. I'm not standing in a store with a crying baby and an angry owner." You're right. Your moment might look different. It might be noticing a coworker struggling and offering help. It might be reaching out to a friend who's been distant. It might be volunteering at a shelter. It might be standing up when everyone else stays silent. Your moment won't announce itself. It won't come with dramatic music and perfect lighting. It'll look ordinary, forgettable, like 1,000 other moments you've lived through without noticing. But if you choose courage in that moment, if you choose humanity over comfort, you'll look back years later and realize that was the day everything changed. That was the day you rewrote your story. Now let's talk about why this story from 1993 matters in 2026. Because you might be thinking, "That's a beautiful story from 30 years ago, but the world is different now." You're right. The world is different. In 1993, people didn't have smartphones, didn't have social media, didn't have the ability to scroll past suffering with a flick of their thumb. If you saw someone struggling, you couldn't just swipe away and pretend you didn't see it. But now we're more disconnected than ever. We have thousands of friends online but feel completely alone. We share everything but connect with no one. We see suffering constantly on our feeds, in our news, in our communities, and we've become numb to it. We tell ourselves, someone else will help. Someone else will care, someone else will step forward. But what if everyone is saying that? What if everyone is waiting for someone else to be the hero? The need for authentic kindness hasn't disappeared. If anything, it's intensified. Loneliness is an epidemic. Depression rates are climbing. Suicide rates are rising. People are drowning in disconnection while surrounded by millions of others. We're losing something essential, something human. Something that stories like Ronnie and Colt's remind us we desperately need to protect. Real community, real connection, real courage that costs us something. Social media creates the illusion of connection while deepening our isolation. We can like a post about someone's struggle without actually helping. We can share a charity link without donating. We can appear compassionate without sacrificing anything. But real kindness, the kind that changes lives, requires something from us. It requires stepping forward when it's uncomfortable, giving when we can't afford it, staying when it's easier to leave, caring when the world tells us not to. When was the last time you stepped in when you could have walked away? Who might be struggling in silence right now, waiting for someone to see them? What would 6 words from the right person mean to you today? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are invitations to examine your own life, your own choices, your own moments of deciding between comfort and courage. Because here's the truth. The world needs you, not the version of you that scrolls past suffering, not the version that waits for someone else to step up, not the version that protects yourself at all costs. The world needs the version of you that chooses humanity even when it's hard, even when it costs you, even when nobody's watching. We're losing this. Real community, real connection. Subscribe so we don't forget what matters. So what happened to Ronnie Lane? Her radio show, Voices of the Invisible, didn't make her famous, didn't make her wealthy, but it made her life meaningful in ways money never could. Over the next 33 years, her show evolved. From apartment broadcast to local radio to eventually a podcast that reached listeners across the country. She never chased fame, never sought sponsorships from companies that conflicted with her values, never compromised the mission. She told stories, real stories about real people, the kind of stories mainstream media ignored. The single father working 3 jobs, the elderly veteran living alone, the immigrant family building a new life, the recovering addict finding redemption, the teacher spending her own money on classroom supplies. She gave voice to the invisible, and slowly those voices grew louder. Her audience remained small compared to celebrity podcasts, but it was dedicated, loyal, people who understood that these stories mattered. Today, at 57, Ronnie still broadcasts every week. Her apartment studio has upgraded slightly, better microphone, proper soundproofing, but the mission remains the same. She never got rich, still lives modestly, still counts pennies sometimes, but she built wealth of a different kind, a legacy measured in changed perspectives, in people who felt seen, in communities that came together because someone finally told their story. In a recent interview, she said, "That day taught me the power of showing up. I've been showing up ever since. Not because it's easy, not because it's profitable, but because it's necessary. Someone has to remind us we're all human, might as well be me." And Colt West. He kept his promise too. The ranch outside Austin transformed completely. What started as a family cattle operation became something unprecedented, a working ranch that doubled as a sanctuary for people rebuilding their lives. He hired veterans dealing with PTSD, ex-convicts who couldn't find work elsewhere, single parents who needed flexible schedules, people who'd been written off by everyone else. He paid fair wages, offered housing, created community. Ranch stopped being just about raising cattle. It became about raising hope. Over 3 decades, hundreds of people passed through. Some stayed for months, others for years. A few never left, becoming permanent fixtures of the community Colt built. Many went on to rebuild their lives elsewhere, carrying forward the same values they'd learned on the ranch. Pay it forward. Take care of each other. Give people chances they don't deserve because someone once gave you a chance you didn't deserve. Colt married. Had 3 children, all grown now, all taught from birth that wealth means nothing if you're not sharing it. His oldest daughter runs the ranch now. His son manages the veterans program. His youngest works with families transitioning from homelessness. The West family legacy isn't land or cattle or money. It's a living testament to what his father taught him and what Ronnie reminded him of on that Miami sidewalk. Take care of people, especially when it costs you something. In his own words, "My father's legacy isn't the land, it's the lesson. Take care of each other. That's all that matters in the end." Ronnie and Colt remained friends for 33 years. Not romantic, never romantic. Just two people who'd saved each other and refused to forget it. They visited once a year. Sometimes Ronnie flew to Texas. Sometimes Colt drove to Miami. They'd spend a weekend catching up, sharing stories, reminding each other of the promises they'd made. Every visit included a trip back to that convenience store. It had changed ownership twice since Victor sold it, but the location remained the same. They'd stand on that sidewalk where Colt had whispered 6 words that changed everything, and they'd remember. Remember the crying baby, the desperate mother, the cruel store owner, the moment when everything could have gone differently. Remember how close Colt came to ending his story, how close Ronnie came to walking away, how one choice redirected 4 lives. Their friendship proved something important. Authentic connection doesn't require proximity, just commitment, just showing up. Just remembering what you promised when everything felt impossible. They still write letters occasionally. Real letters, handwritten, mailed, old-fashioned and intentional. In a world of instant messages and disappearing texts, their friendship remained permanent, tangible, real. They credit each other with saving their lives, and they're both right. Maria, the young mother from the store, rebuilt her life completely. The job training led to steady work as a medical assistant. The steady work led to savings. The savings led to a small apartment, then a better one, then eventually a modest house in a safe neighborhood. Her daughter, that hazel-eyed baby who'd cried in the store, graduated high school with honors, received a scholarship to college, became the first person in her family to earn a degree. She's a social worker now, 27 years old, works with struggling mothers, helping them access resources, navigate systems, find hope. Full circle. When asked why she chose this career, she always tells the same story. "My mom survived because strangers cared when they didn't have to. Now I care for strangers." That's how kindness works. It keeps moving forward. The cycle continues. The ripples spread. 2 strangers' courage 33 years ago still echoes in the lives being saved today. Victor Ramirez died in 2019. Heart attack like Colt's father. Quick. Final. But he died differently than he'd lived most of his life. After selling the store, he spent his final years volunteering. Food banks, homeless shelters, community centers, places where he could give back what his bitterness had stolen from the world. He never became wealthy, never achieved redemption in some grand public way, just quietly tried to be better, day after day, year after year. His funeral was attended by hundreds, people he'd helped, people he'd fed, people who'd witnessed his transformation from cruel store owner to humble servant. Even antagonists can change. Even people who seem irredeemable can find their way back to humanity. Victor proved that it's never too late. Never too late to admit you were wrong. Never too late to choose differently. Never too late to become who you should have been all along. So here we are. The end of a story that started with 6 words. "Your kindness just saved my life." Colt whispered them to Ronnie in 1993. But here's the truth. Someone needs to hear them from you today. Maybe it's a neighbor struggling with grief, a coworker battling depression, a family member who feels invisible, a stranger in a store who needs help but won't ask for it. Maybe it's yourself. Maybe you need to hear that your kindness matters, that your life matters, that the small acts of courage you think nobody notices are changing the world in ways you can't see. 6 words changed everything because they were true. Your kindness is saving lives, even when you can't see it. The world needs you to stay, to care, to show up. You are not invisible. Your actions matter more than you know. Some say Ronnie was foolish to give away money she needed. Others say she was a hero. What do you think? Comment below. Tell me in the comments, what 6 words do you need to hear today? Let's speak life to each other. Because here's what I know for certain. We're standing at the same crossroads Ronnie and Colt faced in 1993. We can choose comfort over courage, self-preservation over sacrifice, scrolling over showing up, or we can choose differently. We can be the person who steps forward when everyone else stays silent, the person who gives when we can barely afford it, the person who cares when the world tells us not to. Ronnie and Colt chose courage, they chose humanity, they chose each other, and that choice created ripples that are still spreading 33 years later. What will you choose? Maybe it's a neighbor, a coworker, a stranger at the store. Maybe it's someone whose name you'll never know but whose life you'll change forever. Maybe it's yourself. Maybe you're the one who needs saving. Maybe stepping forward to help someone else will be exactly what saves you. Don't let this be just another video you watch and forget. Subscribe, share this story, and commit to one act of unexpected kindness this week. Let's prove that 1993 wasn't the last time humanity showed up. Not subscribing yet? Comment and tell me why. I actually want to know what's holding you back. 6 words, that's all it took. What will your 6 words be?